The restroom door slammed so hard it rattled the tiles. His voice followed, sharp and venomous. I fucking said smile more when you serve. Ruby froze where she stood, her trembling hands still holding the edge of the sink. The fluorescent lights hummed above, harsh and unforgiving. She turned slowly, meeting the bloodshot eyes of her manager, Kyle Weston. His breath reeked of whiskey. His tie hung loose, and his face carried that same look she'd come to dread, superiority laced with something darker. I'm trying, sir, she whispered, voice barely audible. I've been on my feet all day. He took a step closer, and she instinctively backed away. The wall met her spine before she realized it. Don't talk back to me, he hissed. You're paid to smile, so smile, you ape. His tone carried both anger, prejudice, and entitlement, the kind of voice that left no room for dignity. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. Fear burned behind her eyes, but she forced herself not to cry. Not yet. Before we continue, welcome to Voices Unchained. If you believe no one deserves to be humiliated for doing their job, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because some stories, like Ruby's, remind us that silence has a breaking point. Now let's rewind. 2 months earlier, Ruby Evans thought her life was finally steady. She'd been working at the restaurant for almost a year. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills while her husband Chris served overseas. They'd talk every few days, her telling him about rude customers, him teasing her about sending care packages filled with her homemade cookies. Then one morning, everything shifted. A new manager arrived, a man named Kyle Weston. He strode in with confidence that bordered on arrogance, that shaking hands, pretending charm. He was in his 40s, tall, always wearing a smirk that never reached his eyes. At first, Ruby greeted him like she did everyone. Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. I'll show you where the stock sheets are kept. He didn't thank her. Instead, he looked her up and down, then said, Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I think I'll manage. That was the first time he called her that. It wouldn't be the last. Within a week, Ruby noticed how differently he treated her compared to her white coworkers. When Lily dropped an order, he laughed it off. When Ruby made a small mistake, he scolded her in front of everyone. You can't do anything right, can you? He'd sneer, voice loud enough for customers to hear. She'd bite her lip and apologize, knowing arguing would only make it worse. Then came the accidents. A hand brushing too close to her waist. A shoulder squeeze that lingered too long. Oops, he'd say with a grin. Just a mistake. But she knew better. The nights grew harder. Ruby would go home, sit on the edge of her bed, and cry quietly so her neighbors wouldn't hear. She wanted to tell Chris, but he was thousands of miles away in a desert, facing dangers she couldn't imagine. How could she add to his worries? So she kept it to herself. She thought maybe if she worked harder, stayed invisible, he'd stop. But Kyle wasn't the type to stop. He fed on her silence. He started criticizing her in front of customers, calling her slow, ungrateful, even stupid. Every insult carved a little deeper into her spirit. Sometimes she'd look at herself in the mirror during breaks and whisper, You can do this, Ruby. Just get through one more shift. But the day it all came to a head, even her strength had limits. It was a Friday. The restaurant was packed. The noise of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Ruby had been running nonstop since noon, balancing trays and faking smiles through exhaustion. Her feet ached, her back screamed, but she didn't stop. Kyle had already been drinking that evening, his words slurred slightly as he walked around, supervising. When he saw Ruby rubbing her sore wrist near the bar, something in his expression turned mean. He followed her when she stepped into the back hallway to catch her breath. That's when the restroom door slammed, and the words that would echo in her memory forever filled the room. I said smile more when you serve. His voice was sharp enough to make her flinch. She turned, trembling. Sir, I've been working since morning. I just needed a moment. I don't care how long you've been working, he snapped. Do your job, and do it right. He stepped closer, his hand grabbing her shirt, pushing her against the wall. You think because you're tired, you can act lazy. Her breath caught in her throat. Please let me go. He pushed her back against the wall. Maybe if you smiled more, customers wouldn't complain. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're hurting me. Then maybe do your job properly, he muttered, his grip tightening. And that's when the front door opened. Because that was the day Chris Evans came home. He'd just returned from deployment, still in uniform. The customers noticed him first, standing tall with his duffel bag over his shoulder. Some nodded, some clapped quietly. "Welcome home, soldier." He smiled modestly, scanning the restaurant. "Thank you. I'm just here to see my wife, Ruby Evans." One of the waitresses hesitated, her face pale. "She just went to the back with the manager." Chris's expression shifted instantly. The calm melted away, replaced by something sharper, instinct. He knew danger when he saw it, and something about her tone told him everything he needed to know. He walked quickly past the kitchen, ignoring the startled looks. Then he heard it, the muffled sound of Ruby's voice, trembling through the thin restroom door. He didn't knock. He kicked it open. The door slammed against the wall, and the scene hit him like a bullet. Kyle, drunk, angry, hand gripping his wife's shirt. Ruby, cornered, tears streaming down her face. "Let her go," Chris said, voice low and dangerous. Kyle turned, startled. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Chris took a step forward. "I'm the man whose wife you're touching. Let her go." For a moment, the room froze. Kyle's arrogance faltered as his eyes flicked over Chris's uniform, the name tag, the Navy SEAL insignia. He dropped his grip instantly. Ruby ran into her husband's arms, sobbing. "It's okay, baby," Chris whispered. "I'm here now." Kyle stammered. "Hey, I was just talking to her." Chris looked down at him, voice steady but firm. "Talking doesn't leave bruises." Ruby told him everything in broken sentences. The harassment, the threats, the months of fear. Every word made Chris's jaw tighten. "You laid your hands on my wife," he said quietly. "That was your biggest mistake." Kyle tried to act tough. "I'm the manager here. I was teaching her a lesson." Chris didn't hesitate. His fist connected squarely with Kyle's jaw. The man hit the floor hard, gasping. "That," Chris said coldly, "is for every lesson you thought you could teach her." He turned to Ruby. "Let's go." And they walked out together, his arm wrapped protectively around her. That night, Ruby cried again, but this time in her husband's arms, not alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to ruin your homecoming." Chris kissed her forehead. "You didn't ruin anything. You survived it. Now we're going to make sure he never does this again." The next morning, Ruby filed a report, not just with HR, but with the labor board. When the story came out, other women from the restaurant stepped forward. They'd suffered too, in silence. But now, they weren't alone. Kyle was fired, investigated, and eventually charged. His career ended, his reputation shattered. Ruby went back to work weeks later, this time walking through those doors with her head held high. The fear was gone. In its place was something stronger. Peace. And as she served customers, her smile wasn't forced anymore. It was real. Because this time, justice had walked in, and it wore the uniform of a man who refused to stay silent. So remember, never mistake kindness for weakness. Because the person you look down on today might just be the one who brings justice to your door tomorrow. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Because when stories like Ruby's are shared, the silence breaks, and justice finally finds its voice.